Hello everyone and welcome to another random video on the internet. Today we are taking a look at a pretty popular matchup in the One Punch Man community, and I'll be giving you my thoughts on it and my reasoning for why I personally believe this fight is quite a mismatch. Before we start though, I want to say I'm just here to have fun and talk about a series I enjoy. Everybody views the series differently, and if you disagree with anything I say, please go right ahead. Everyone has their own takes and views. I'm not here to change your mind, I'm just here to have a bit of fun. Without any further ado, let's get straight into the video. Tatsumaki and Boros are both undoubtedly some of the strongest characters in One Punch Man, and they're both viewed in pretty high regard by most of the fanbase. If you've been around this channel before, you'll know that I, in particular, scale both of them far higher than most people would. But seeing as I've spent the last 4 uploads on the channel directly or indirectly hyping up Tatsumaki to an extent which I don't think anyone has ever hyped her up to before, I'm starting to see more and more people mixing up exactly how I feel about this matchup. So today I am here to explain why, despite all the praise I've given the Esper, I still believe the Cyclops would destroy her in a battle. Firstly, let's go over Tatsumaki. I'll keep this section brief as I've focused on her a ton in my last few videos, so if you want a more detailed explanation you can check them out. But for a quick summary, Tatsumaki is an absolute monster. She is the ultimate weapon of the Hero Association, far stronger than any other hero excluding Blast and King. While fatigued and injured, she can one-shot beings like Sairochi, who are multiple tiers above beings like Orochi, who have calcs that place them at the high end of small planet level. Tatsumaki is multiple one-shot tiers above that, so her maximum output, while healthy and at full power, should be somewhere in the planetary ranges. She has a wide arsenal of abilities, including but not limited to psychic bindings, barriers, some level of gravity manipulation, flight, telekinesis, crushing large-scale attacks, and so on. Her base barrier can tank planet-level beams, and while fully concentrated, she can treat these planetary attacks like nothing and casually toss them to the side like toys. Another impressive showing Tatsumaki has is against Saitama, where in the official translation of the manga, the Baldy calls her pretty tough. Coming from Saitama, this is definitely a very impressive statement. I have even gone on record saying that fully healthy Tatsumaki should probably have higher levels of raw power than Final 4 monster Garo. Not that she would win in a fight, but just that in terms of sheer, raw power output, she should scale slightly higher than he does based off feats. Again, for an explanation, please check out my Tatsumaki vs Garo video. The only thing Tatsumaki sort of lacks is speed feats, but for reasons I won't be getting into now due to webcomic spoilers, her speed can be scaled to even characters like Flashy Flash if the manga's events follow the webcomic in this upcoming arc. All in all, Tatsumaki is an absolute beast and undeniably stands atop the One Punch Man totem pole before we get into god tier characters like Saitama or Cosmic Garo. So, with all that being said, how can I say that Boros beats Tatsumaki in a fight? Well, let's get into it. First things first, let's cover one of the main arguments that pretty directly compares these two characters. In one of the One Punch Man audiobooks, Tatsumaki uses her powers on Saitama. She tries to restrain him, but it has no effect. This is Saitama with hair, most likely before he broke his limiter, so he should be far weaker than the Saitama that fights Boros later in the story. We'll get to why that is important in a few minutes, but I want to address some of the counter-arguments I heard for why this shouldn't be used to scale Tatsumaki. For one, this event takes place a couple years before the start of Season 1, so she very well could have gotten stronger since then. This is fair to say, but whatever boost she got would undoubtedly be overshadowed by the boost that Saitama has gotten since then. Remember, this is Saitama before he broke his limiter. Whatever jump in power Tatsumaki makes would likely pale in comparison to how much stronger Saitama gets from this point to the Boros battle. So overall, I don't think that the argument of Tatsumaki growing stronger since the events of the audiobook really debunks anything I will say later in the video. And the second counter-argument is that Tatsumaki may not have used her full power because the terrain wasn't damaged. But one, the terrain not being damaged doesn't mean she's not going all out, because the only thing Tats tried to do here is restrain Saitama. Psychic bindings don't usually cause collateral damage in the series, and we also see something similar when Tatsumaki tries to fling Saitama into space during their actual battle. Here we don't see anything else flying or any damage to the environment whatsoever. Saitama is the only thing being affected. On top of that, in the audiobook, after this encounter, Tatsumaki is convinced that Saitama must be a ghost, because how else could he be resistant to her psychic powers? She is entirely convinced that Saitama was completely above her psychic abilities, and even says it twice to Fubuki later. It seems to me that she would have used at least a decent chunk of her power if she's this certain that the entity she encountered completely surpasses her psychic abilities. But regardless, the main takeaway here is that Tatsumaki tried to restrain Saitama and was completely unable to affect him. Now moving on to Boros and his scaling. A lot of the arguments I'll be using here I've already covered in my video specifically dedicated to Boros, so if you want a more detailed explanation, I would suggest checking that out. But I will be mentioning most of the main arguments here too, just perhaps not in as much detail as I did back then. Starting off, even in his armored state, Boros takes a baseline normal punch from Saitama without even bleeding. Saitama considers Boros to be a threat and a monster here, so he's not holding back in the way he does with characters like Rover or Garo. That's not to say Saitama's going all out, just that he's not trying to keep Boros alive here, so he just delivers a baseline normal punch with no additional suppression. The same level of punch that was used to kill Orochi, by the way. Boros then clashes with Saitama, and the Baldy right away recognizes him as strong, and would later go on to reassert that Boros is indeed strong 2 more times during and after the battle. He even says to Genos that Boros was strong, so any arguments of Saitama was just trying to make Boros feel better should immediately be thrown out of the window. These statements are impressive because Saitama usually cannot tell how strong monsters are because they're all so far beneath him. But with Boros, he's able to tell the difference. So for Saitama to say Boros is strong, he would have to actually feel something against him. Whether it be the power of Boros' blows or the fact that he is able to take punches without dying, something is clearly impressing Saitama here, the way no one else in the entire series has done aside from Cosmic Garo. This is in stark contrast to Tatsumaki, who is only considered to be pretty tough by Saitama, and that may be a mistranslation too, as the statement varies from translation to translation. So this is one reason to have Boros above Tatsumaki, Saitama's views on the two of them. The One Punch Man Encyclopedia directly calls Saitama vs. Boros the strongest versus the strongest. Tatsumaki is present in the story at this point, so the statement would be including her, meaning Boros and Saitama are both the strongest, but Tatsumaki is not. In the same encyclopedia, it is also stated that released Boros has rivaling abilities to suppress Saitama. Both of these statements obviously put Boros above Tatsumaki, so this is the second reason to have Boros above her. The statements from the guide. In the actual fight, Boros is able to outpace casual Saitama with only one hand during one of their exchanges, and Saitama blocks his hits on several occasions, which he usually doesn't really do in fights. In fact, something interesting I've noticed is that in both the anime and the manga, Saitama blocks or dodges every single hit from released Boros except the one big punch to the stomach, the chest blast, and the blow to the back of the head, after which the cover for the next chapter says Saitama took damage. I go into this in depth in my original How Strong is Boros video, so if you want a more detailed explanation for why this is a valid page and statement, you can go check that out. Here I will just address a couple of the counter-arguments I've heard for this. Firstly, I've heard it said that this is part of Boros' monologue and that the cover is just stating his thoughts. This is pretty much the only argument in all of power scaling that actually gets me kind of pissed, because it's literal headcanon. There is not a single chapter cover statement in the entire series that comes from the perspective of a character. Not a single one. People are just making this up, like literally, they're making this up to downscale Boros. On top of that, the direct translation of the kanji in this panel is unexpected damage. Why would Boros think that to himself exactly? Unexpected damage. Yeah, sure, that's what Boros would think. Why would he think that? Short answer, he wouldn't. The far more compelling counterargument to this is that chapter cover statements allegedly are added not by One or Murata, but by the editorial staff of Viz, and therefore shouldn't be considered canon. I don't really know if this is true or not, as I'm not super in touch with the inner workings of Japan, but if this really is the case, then this statement can be called into question. However, this statement is to this day in the Japanese release of the manga. You can check it out for yourself. Find the manga in Japanese and go see it. The statement is right there. I've done it myself. And if this statement really clashed with Murata and One's vision of the fight or created problems with the story, I think One, Murata, or both would have probably called it out by now, explained that it's not to be taken seriously or just straight up had it removed from the releases. But no, it's right there to this very day. They haven't objected to it publicly or anything. So even if the statement wasn't originally made by the authors, which again I'm not even sure about, this is just something I've heard being said, it's pretty clear that the authors either agree with the statement or at the very least don't mind it. And again, that's assuming that they're not the ones who made the statement in the first place, as the statement is very consistent with the rest of the fight, because it's not just the cover that indicates Boros actually did something to Saitama. It depends on the translation a bit, but right after landing this attack that supposedly damaged Saitama, Boros also says, that one definitely connected. He's already hit Saitama a couple times, but this one blow, this definitely connected. There is definitely an emphasis being put on this moment. Boros has powered up and actually done a tiny bit of damage. He also says Saitama's wounds will continue to increase as he fights. For Boros to make such a statement, there would have to be some physical damage visible on Saitama, not just dirt. On top of this, the expression Saitama has definitely indicates that he did feel something. It's not like how it was with Deep Seeking or Garo, where they both attacked Saitama and clearly did absolutely nothing. And again, the One Punch Man Encyclopedia also says released Boros has rivaling abilities to suppress Saitama. So all this is pretty consistent. Tatsumaki couldn't affect Saitama with her powers in the audiobook, meanwhile Boros slightly damaged a much stronger Saitama. Even just comparing Saitama's visual expressions between the Boros fight and the Tatsumaki fight paints a pretty clear picture of who affected him more with their blows. This is the third reason to have Boros above Tatsumaki, the respective effects they both have on Saitama. One last thing that I think kind of needs to be mentioned is that Boros is stated to be able to blast away entire planets with his latent energy, which is something that would actually be kind of more impressive than the scaling Tatsumaki has, as Boros is stated to be able to just blast away the planets, not just like... He doesn't just have the attack potency to destroy a planet, but he also just has the destructive capacity too, he just blasts it away. All this isn't even going into Meteoric Burst, which Saitama straight up says is almost a real fight in his eyes. Oh, and also, there's also this one statement where Boros remarks to himself that he senses limitless energy coming from Saitama, and he's still confident he could beat Saitama, so therefore Boros has bare minimum infinite three-dimensional energy. Don't at me, Boros is universal. I'm obviously joking, by the way, for anyone who doesn't get that. Overall, Boros is definitely far stronger and more durable and faster than Tatsumaki in my opinion, based off several feats and statements from the manga, the anime, the audiobooks, and the guides. I don't think there's that much to debate here. So to finish off the video, what does this mean for One Punch Man scaling as a whole? Well, released Boros being above Tatsumaki in attack potency and durability places him far above Gargoyle Garo as well, and cements him as pretty much the strongest character in the verse, aside from god tiers like Blast, Saitama, God, and Cosmic Garo. I don't really see any issues with this, as Gargoyle Garo isn't really that impressive. Like, he's strong, don't get me wrong, but he's also quite overrated in my eyes, and I've gone pretty in-depth into why I don't think he's all that powerful in my Boros video, my Sage Centipede vs Orochi video, and in my Garo vs Tatsumaki videos. so if you want more details, be sure to check them out. One last thing I want to bring up, in my original How Strong is Boros video, I did say released Boros should be around the level of Gargoyle Garo, but my views have changed a lot since then. Mainly, Sage's stock has gone down a ton in my eyes, and therefore Garo's stock also goes down because his scaling is directly connected to the scaling of Sage Centipede. So yeah, I don't believe that anymore. I think Garo is definitely a lot weaker than released Boros. And at the time I also underestimated characters like Orochi, Sairochi, and Tatsumaki a lot as well. So yeah, some of the stuff in that original video is sort of outdated, but the main arguments all still stand. But in any case, this has been it for me today. I hope you enjoyed, I hope you're not too mad at me for making this video, and with nothing else to say, I wish you a good rest of the day. Goodbye.